Welcome, everyone, to episode 10 of the Dateable AF podcast. Champagne taste versus Lone Star budget, dating across class lines. What happens when one of you wants rooftop cocktails and the other's thinking 2-for-1 tacos? Today, we're talking about dating across class lines because love might be priceless, but dating sure isn't. Rachel, we have a lot to say about this topic, about socioeconomic status and dating.
Yes, we do. And I do want to say right up front that I am also working on in the world of social emotional learning. So if I accidentally say SEL instead of SES,
we might need a little social emotional learning here too. It all fits in.
I think maybe I'll just say financial status. It might be safer for the purposes of this podcast. But yeah, I mean, this is a great episode. I think you guys will enjoy this because this can be a very touchy subject, and especially when you first start dating.
Yes, for sure. I think there's always kind of this unspoken tension that happens because we get afraid to talk about money stuff. And I think that happens even like whether you're the person who is on the lower end of that or the higher end of that, it can just feel super awkward.
Yes. I was thinking about this earlier today that I also think it's important to think about when you very first go out with someone. I don't know that you need to have these deep conversations in the very, so we'll try along the way to delineate between what you need to talk about a few dates down the road versus
like what's important to discuss right up front and what you can wait on. I don't know if it still exists, but there used to be this dating website called millionairematch.com where everyone on the site had to prove that they had a net worth of at least $1 million before they could get on the site. So for some people, that is a very important factor in who they choose to date. But I'd say for most of us, that is not going to be the be all end all. But why do you think this topic feels so vulnerable and so awkward?
Well, I mean, talking about money, whether you're trying to date someone or not, is an awkward conversation oftentimes. So, I mean, let's just start there.
Yes, for sure.
The two biggest things, and there may be another one, you can tell me, Dr. Kyle, but two of the biggest difficult things in a ongoing relationship are sex and money.
Sex and money. That's what brings people to couples therapy most of the time.
Right. And so you add on this whole piece of just starting out with someone, and that just feels like it's full of landmines because it's just, I think you don't know how deep to go into it. And if you know you're on the lower end of the stick of the financial piece, can feel hard because you're maybe concerned that, you're not going to be able to keep up or judged for it. And then if you're on the higher end of it, some people, they just scared somebody's wanting them for their money or going to try to take their money.
Yes. Or also afraid of how people might perceive them for being higher income or high net worth. Yeah, I think on either side, it can just be a really tricky situation. The idea for this episode came from one of my therapist friends and colleagues, and she brought up a really good point. She said she has a partner, but she said even with their friend group, she said they face this idea that some of their friends will, refuse to go on a trip unless they're flying first class to Europe. And then she said they have other friends that really can't even afford to go out to dinner, and that they're sort of in the middle of both of those things and that they have to navigate it on both sides. And I was just thinking about how that plays out in dating situations as well.
Yeah. And I do think I also had a conversation with somebody the other day about this. And when you start off and you want to pay for everything, and then all of a sudden you set an expectation as well, if you're not actually really comfortable doing that down the road and you're surprised that somebody's expecting you to. So
yes,
there are all variations of this. And I think that's what we're going to try to tease out today and maybe help you guys with a little bit, is just sort of how you make this really difficult conversation easier. And I do love this quote we have that says, when low maintenance is a compliment versus when it's code for discomfort. And
yes, Like I'm very low maintenance. I like camping. I don't like the Four Seasons. Something like that.
I have had that exact conversation.
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Yes. And I think sometimes people want to frame it that way. I'm a low maintenance person, when in fact they might feel a little bit self-conscious about what they can or can't afford to do.
yeah. I think that what you also may consider sort of a weekly easy thing to afford could be considered also a really nice outing for a person, a special occasion thing.
Yes, for
Uh,
sure.
and so I do think all of these things can cause some interesting conversations.
For sure. Yeah, thinking about the place that I might go to dinner for a special occasion for, for my birthday or an anniversary or something, someone else is a regular at that restaurant. And so that's something to think about, that if you're dating someone who is a regular at your special occasion place, you're going to have some conversations about that.
Yeah, that's the date night dilemmas.
Yeah, date
And
night dilemmas.
yeah, I think it's uh interesting because like I said in the very beginning, if somebody asks you out on a date, whichever person initiates the ask out, then I think you go wherever it is they've asked you out to go. And if it's a taco truck, you go to a taco truck. And if it's the Four Seasons bar, and then you go there and you have a date.
Hmm.
Um, and that's not the time or place to say, hey, that's not, you don't want to shun that. Just go and enjoy it. Um, I will say that if every time you go out, that person suggests that you're only going to places that are taco trucks, um, you have to decide how important it is for you to tackle that. And if you want to go to nice places, then maybe you have to pay. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Before Joe and I were together, I dated someone whose income was significantly higher than mine. And it's funny because I didn't know how significantly higher it was. This was back in the day when we got paper paychecks. And I was moving her car for some reason, and I looked down and her paycheck was sitting in the center console, and I almost choked on myself because it was like 5 times higher than my paycheck. And I was like, wow, okay, I had no idea. And I remember when we started dating, she suggested that we take a trip. And so we took a trip to Hawaii, and I was scrambling around. This was back when I had 3 small kiddos and my income was not that high. Not that it is now. Just to clarify the way I said that. Now I'm a baller. But back then I was struggling to make ends meet. And so I worked extra hours. I gathered all this money and saved this money. And we went on this trip to Hawaii and we had a great time. And then we came back, and literally like a month later, she's like, okay, let's plan another trip. And I was like, girl, that was my trip for the next year and a half. So this to her, this was just like commonplace. I just go to Hawaii every other month. So like that, it was something to think about for sure, that I had to have some conversation to say, I cannot take this kind of trip every couple of months, or even probably twice a year at the time. So we ended up having a conversation. I am fiercely independent and I don't like the idea of someone else doing something for me. And so she explained, she said, I can afford this. It's not a big deal for me. And I'd rather have someone along. I'd rather have you along with me to go on a trip. So if you let me help you buy your plane ticket or help with the hotel. And so it took a lot of discussion and some finagling, but that's kind of how it panned out. Was I had to either not go or get okay with being helped financially with that.
And I think today we can safely say that's not Joe, not your wife.
No, that
So
is
it
not
didn't
Joe.
work. It
That
worked
was
for
a
you.
previous dating experience. So the other thing is, I will say I've been on the opposite side of that, where I was the person who made more money, and I didn't care. Like I felt the same way. Like I'd rather go to this nice place and pick up the tab, and then the other person would do what they could. You know, when it was her turn to plan a date, maybe she cooked a lovely dinner for us at home, or maybe she planned a picnic, things like that.
And I think you just hit on something that's very important is that if you need to check in with yourself, if you're driving all the dates, deciding and you're the person that has more financial freedom, then it is really nice to back off and sort of share. It's not as much about sharing the cost as it is about sharing what you're going to do on the dates,
Yeah.
so that everybody gets to weigh in, and maybe you have more shared experiences that way. And I will say, some people, like, I love to cook, not because I can't go out to eat financially, because I'm a baller too, like Sarah.
Totally. This podcast is making us millions.
Woo! But I love to do that just because I love doing it, as we've mentioned before. And I also think that I have friends that could eat anywhere, and they actually just love a greasy joint. Sometimes that's what they like. So that to me is a great way to not get so fixated on how much something costs in the very beginning. And what you do is share the responsibility of picking the date.
And giving the other person an experience. It's not about how much that experience costs. Like, if you never had a Dirty's hamburger, you are missing out.
I will say that's good. Unlike those Chick-fil-A things where I had to go down that nasty path.
Hey.
With the
I was
no.
trying to give you an experience by taking you to Chick-fil-A.
I am a lesson. I did not need that experience. My people, shame on my house for
Hey,
that.
I did make a donation to a gay cause after
No,
that.
you didn't.
You don't know.
You ate those nugs like somebody was going to snatch them from
I
you.
was afraid you might try to snatch them from me. Those were good. That Chick-fil-A sauce.
But I do agree with you about dirties.
Yes. So it's not about how much something costs, but maybe you're showing somebody something new that they've never experienced before,
Yeah.
and
I was
sharing that part of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to think about it, and especially in the beginning. And then you sort of figure some of that stuff out. It might lead you into those conversations in a little bit more of a natural way that feels good. Um, One thing I had this conversation with a good friend of mine who sees things in ways that just amaze me, and she just opens my mind up to new thinking, and I just love it. And I was telling her that we were going to talk about this. And her first reaction was, actually, that's a value system. Just like your religious beliefs are value system, your uh, how you view politics can be a value system.
Mm-hmm.
And that she said, I see that as a value. And it was a great conversation because she said, if you share a value of being together and wanting to share time together, then you figure out, if you both value that equally, then you figure out how to make that work, that in ways that work for both of you. So for instance, I said at this age, if I'm with somebody who can't travel in all the ways that I travel, then I can't afford to bring them along. And, I'm getting to be a little older, and I don't want to not go. And she said, so she just said, for me personally, then maybe I don't do it 5 times a year. I just do it twice a year. Uh, not because somebody's asking me not to, but because I actually don't want to be gone from that person 5 times a year. I'm actually not interested in being away that much. And I just thought that was a very cool lens to look through, and it makes sense.
I do love that.
Yeah. And the other person, if they value you, are going to be perfectly okay with you having experiences that you're going to have without them.
For sure. And they might be a little disappointed if they can't afford to go, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that you should deny yourself, or I believe that doesn't mean you should deny yourself having some experiences because the other person can't afford to do it.
Right. Right. And I do believe though that if you're really locked with somebody and you're able to talk about these things, and it's sort of this beginning to let somebody, making sure that you're bringing something, you're adding something in, but you're not trying to own them in some way.
Yeah.
Like you can't, you're moving. Once we come together, then we have to move at the same rate, the same pace, doing all these things together.
As a unit. I think lesbians are really good at that, moving as a unit.
Ooh.
It's funny because Joe and I do a fair number of things separately. We love doing things together, but we have a lot of different interests as well. And people often ask if something's wrong. If I show up at something without her, or she shows up with, without me, people say, "Are y'all okay? Is everything all right?" It's like, yeah, I don't want to play pickleball for 4 hours, and she does. So we move through the world differently. And I think that's part of this too, is, you don't have to be joined at the hip with someone.
Yeah. And there's a question I have too. I think it's very good about what if it's someone's love language that they want to, like maybe the person you were talking about, it was some sort of thing that made her happy to be able to take you to all those things and pay for you to do all those things. And I mean, I think it is for some people, they like doing that.
I think so too. I think you have to be careful. In my case, I don't think it was this, but I think people can use that as a form of control. So I'm paying for this trip. I'm going to set the agenda. I'm going to say where we're going. I'm picking the hotels. And that, I think you got to watch out for that, because sometimes it is, in fact, just someone's love language. I think you're exactly right. People love giving. And I think maybe sometimes it's part of your lesson to learn to receive. So that's something to pay attention to.
Yes, and somebody on this podcast has a little, and I'm not going to point any fingers. We'll call her Veronica. Has a hard time receiving.
Well, I don't know who you're talking about, but
it's just the other person on the podcast right now.
I don't see anyone else here.
It's really good to know that about yourself.
You think self-awareness is a beautiful thing?
Harsh someone's giving vibe.
I think that's true. It is true. But think about this. We didn't really even factor this into our conversation, but it is vulnerable being the receiver of something. Mm-hmm. If I say, here, Rachel, here's $20, then I'm the powerful person giving you $20. But for you to be the vulnerable person saying, man, I need $20, that's vulnerable. And so I think that is a practice. And, there's some level of that might be appropriate early in dating. But anyway, that could be for another episode. But graciously receiving, if the other person wants to take you somewhere nice and you're early in a dating relationship, I think you just graciously receive it and be appreciative.
Yes. And I will say that again, if you're always stepping in and putting your credit card in when you first start dating, or paying for the trip when you're, and you don't give that person a chance, then you are setting a precedent here. You're doing something that says to them, and there are two things I would think about is one, what you're doing. You're basically saying to them, oh, I'm just going to pay for everything. Mm-hmm. And so if you get to the point where you are more seriously dating and you all of a sudden want to go on a big trip and they're just waiting for you to buy the tickets and you're thinking, well, I'm kind of done with that. Well, hello. Don't act. When they're surprised and a little, have a butt burn on it.
Hurt about it. Yeah, exactly.
It's a problem. But that's the other thing. The other piece of it is if you just step back, if that's kind of your personality, it's healthy to see if somebody's going to take some responsibility and do something. That's going to tell you a lot in dating. Whether or not they're always waiting for you to do it, that's can be a red flag.
Yes.
And that if you feel this shared opportunity of like, no, you did it last time, I've got this one, this one's mine, or I would like to really decide where we're going to go next, to me, that's a green flag. That says that somebody's wanting to share this opportunity with me and not expecting to do everything for me or expecting me to do,
Yes.
everything.
That reciprocity, you're right. That is so important. And both sides can be red flags. If you're the person who's constantly paying for everything and refusing to let the other person participate, that's a red flag. Them letting you pay for everything up front, that's also a red flag. But the flip side of that is the person who never steps up and never offers. So the green flag, like you said, is look for reciprocity. And if someone can't reciprocate financially at the same level as you, that's okay. But are they participating equally in the planning and the showing you new things and the spending time together?
Yep. And that, as you go along, I have plenty of couple friends, married friends, who are not at all equal in what they financially bring to the table or what they originally brought to the table. But I do think they practiced these things in the beginning. And then there was a point where there were decisions made about whether or not how they were going to merge their lives and the value that held in the merging. And I think that is a different conversation, but that they ramped up to that. And I think if you can do that sharing along the way, when you get ready to decide, hey, I think we care enough about one another that we're going to push our lives together, I think you're going to have a lot healthier conversation about how you deal with that big inequity, if there is one, in the finances. And I've seen it work. Actually, most of my really close friends that have that going on, it actually, their relationships don't have anything pending around the financial stuff. It's just
Yeah.
it's not a discussion, really.
Yeah. And I think when both people are secure, then it tends to be less of an issue.
Yeah.
So I have a question. I think that there are ways that this can subtly show up that we don't even notice. I'll give you an example and then you can let me know if you've seen this as well. But someone who, for example, makes a good income and they're constantly gravitating toward someone who does not, someone who's out of work or someone who is, perhaps working a minimum wage job of some sort. And I've seen this pattern where someone's constantly picking someone who makes significantly less money than they do. Do you see that? And what do you think about that pattern?
That's interesting. I don't know that I've really witnessed that a lot. Tell me more about that. What do you think's going on there?
I wonder if it's a way of maintaining control in the relationship,
Mm,
or I also wonder if it's someone who doesn't believe in their own worth. So they don't believe they're worth someone. I can think of a few people in particular, a few clients that I have who consistently date someone who is not at the same income level or the same education level or the same professional level that they are. And so they're constantly finding themselves paying for everything or getting resentful, or someone's out of work and so they can't pay their part of the mortgage or the rent. And it seems to me like an issue where someone doesn't value themselves.
yeah. And that was happening in the they knew that was in play. So,
Mhm.
but doing it anyway and then getting frustrated with somebody about that is odd. And I don't know what to say about that other than it's just unhealthy. um, the yeah, the other the other thing that has come up that I notice is that I am at a stage in my life where a lot of the women that I come in contact with or that I'm around we've all acquired a certain degree of financial security. So, all varying degrees, but some financial security for the most part.
Nobody's sleeping on a mattress on the floor.
Not yet, because based on the current political climate, it could happen. They'll probably have to edit that out. Anyway, the what I have found is that I do notice that some people really want to lead with their financial status. And so I'm just going to say this for me because I can't speak for other people. But since I am the single lesbian dater here on this podcast, that I can't tell you how uninterested I am in you leading with your financial status.
Yes. So did you hear that, everyone? If you want to date Rachel, do not lead with your financial status. I
I
would
do.
say that is a good tip in general. That nobody wants to hear how much money you make right off the bat. That's not
Well,
cool.
actually there are some people that do. And if that's your jam, then that's your jam. But I just don't think that's a very attractive foot to put forward.
Mhm.
And in saying that, the balance is that it is of interest to me that you are able to take care of your personal business, that you are, and we've talked about this before, that you are able to, you're paying your taxes, that you are doing things to secure yourself financially, that you're not trying to marry in to wealth in hopes that I'm going
You
to be
quit your
able,
job in
yeah,
June.
exactly. But to me, that is a very different scenario than somebody wanting to talk to me about their or interest in the car they drive or the you know
Neighborhood they live in,
and
or
that name
Mhm.
dropping and things like that. I personally find that pretty off-putting.
Yes. I think most secure people find that off-putting, and so that's just food for thought. That could be a whole other episode for us about leading with humility and being curious and wanting to learn about the other person instead of trying to one up people who are toppers. Like you did that, well, I can top it.
Oh, I thought maybe there for a minute you were about to talk about something else. All
we were
right.
going in the sexual direction. Nope, not today.
Not today, maybe tomorrow.
That's right. But people who are always like, you went skydiving. Well, I went skydiving 10 times out of a higher plane, or whatever. It's like, okay. So that's, if you're doing that, especially about income or net worth or those kinds of things related to money, that's most often not going to attract you a high quality partner.
I was going to say it'll attract people, but they're not going to be healthy people. And maybe you dig that. And I have the flip side of that, because I've had this experience, is that I have dated someone who is loves to camp and interested in the great outdoors or more rugged places to stay.
That's
And
a trip she's going to have to take without
and
you, girl. I
and
know.
I did. I just had to say it right up front. I'm like, if we go there and there's a Four Seasons, I'm happy to do it. I don't mind the hike, but when I get there, I need a nice bathtub and an indoor toilet and yes, some creature comforts. And for me, that is true. I'm not trying to be snobby, but at this stage in my life, at this place I'm in, I like indoor plumbing. And I do like a little room service every now and then. Mhm.
Yes, for sure. Although I will say, I know this about you, that you don't have to have room service. You would
No,
be willing to stay at a place that did not have room service. But I feel that your sleeping
absolutely.
bag days are over.
If that, I'm gonna pass a lot more judgment on a bad wine list than I am a lack of room service. And
Okay, that's not snobby at all.
I'm owning it. I have a side of me that is a little pretentious in that way, but
Okay. All right. Well, who knows how many dates you just lost because of that, but we'll keep on going. Keep on going. One of the things I do want to address is that I don't believe that socioeconomic status is the same as ambition level. And I think sometimes we confuse those two things.
so say more.
Well, I know plenty of people who are really passionate about what they do and who put a lot of energy into what they do, and it may not net them a huge income. So I have a ton of folks who are passionate about working for nonprofits, who are passionate about doing volunteer work. And they're financially self-sufficient, but they are not high earners. And I think sometimes we confuse those two things. Like if you don't make a lot of money, maybe you're lazy, maybe you don't have ambition. And the flip side too is you might be on third base, but it's not because you hit a triple. It's because your daddy had a trust fund. And so just because you do have high net worth, that does not necessarily mean you're an ambitious person. And so I just think it's important to keep those two things separate in your mind. And when you're looking at your own value system, don't mistake one for the other, and make sure you're looking at what you truly value.
That's a great conversation. I know a number of people who could have been a doctor, a lawyer. They could have done anything they wanted to do, but that's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to be happy in their careers, and they have gone in knowing that yes, it might limit their income, their earning potential. So if they adjust their lives accordingly, then I think that's just a beautiful thing, because you should follow your passion. And I respect the hell out of that.
Yep. And it says something about them as a person, that they were more interested in being happy. I can tell you from experience of working with lots of high net worth clients that money is not the thing that makes people happy. Now, the lack of money can make people unhappy. So if you don't have enough money to pay your bills, I think it can make a person struggle. But beyond some creature comforts, the more, it's like more money, more problems. So don't confuse money with happiness.
Right. And I mean, I know someone, I have a very good friend who did really well, and the price she paid for the work that she had to do and she's been retired for a number of years now, but I've asked her straight up, was it worth it? Because she does have a lot of financial security, and she cannot ever clearly tell me, yes, it was, because the pound of flesh emotional cost of what she had to do in order to get there it took a long time to balance that out.
Yeah.
And so that's the other thing, is being, when you're dating somebody and they hate what they do and they're just grinding it out because of, I mean, that's not going to be pleasant either.
No. And it's something you and I have talked about recently, just at this stage of our lives. I want to do work that makes me happy. And I have a therapy practice that brings me a ton of joy. And I really don't continue to see clients that don't bring me joy, because I'd rather be happy than see a bunch of people that I don't care for.
Yep. And those are the decisions I make am making in my career and my life now.
Yeah. And it's part of why we're doing the pod, because we both find this to be a lot of fun. And so, doing things that bring you more joy are going to attract the right people to you, for sure.
Yeah, that's the big one, guys. I think a really big takeaway is that if you're fixated on these things, you are going to you may get girlfriends, but be careful, because I don't think they're going to be healthy. I think anyone who is looking at the amount of money you're making and that is important to them, anybody who is on either side heavily of that coin of not ever showing up financially, always showing up financially, that anybody who's drawn to that in a big way, it's a red flag.
Yep, I agree. So how do you think, if you're at the beginning of a dating relationship, how do you think you can acknowledge those differences in socioeconomic status without making them a big thing?
I think, as I mentioned in the beginning, I do think just stepping up and wanting to participate in picking the dates and just saying, hey, I love to do a lot of fun things, and I'd like to introduce you to some of those things. And I don't typically, when I go out, I look for places where I can get, listen to some great music, and I see it early and there's no cover, because that way I can listen to more music. Or I love picking out Austin has great places to eat. And if I'm going to eat out 3 or 4 times a week, then that's important to me. to find places where I can access great food in Austin and not have to spend a ton of money. And then I try to save the really nice things for special moments.
Special occasions. Yep.
Yeah.
And do you think it's okay to directly call out the difference, to say, hey, it seems like there's a difference in our income or a difference in our spending ability, and I'd like to talk about that and how that might look moving forward?
I think you would eventually do that. In the beginning, I think what I might be inclined to do is just say, "Hey, you know what? Uh, you've you've picked some really cool places, and I know that it's important to you to kind of manage your income in a way that's makes you feel comfortable. There's a really special thing I'd like to do. Would it be okay if I just jump on that and take you with me? Because I know that's probably outside of the special occasion thing, but I would love to do that. That would make me happy."
Yes.
And so more of a on the heels of me inviting them to do something really nice, maybe come in the back door a little bit on acknowledging that that's not something that I expect them to share in, because I recognize that that's probably not comfortable.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a great way to put that, that I want to treat you to something special. Would you allow me to do that? And I agree with what you said too, that this isn't something you would probably talk about on a first or second or even third date. But if you're going to be dating someone for the long haul, I do think it's important to just acknowledge that up front. And I think it's probably more comfortably acknowledged by the person who makes less money
Hmm.
than the person who makes more. It would be awkward to say, like, hey, I know I make a lot more money than you. But if you were the person who made less, to say, hey, it seems like there's a discrepancy in our income, and I want you to know that I want to be an equal participant, and that equality may not come from money. The equality might come from me planning some really cool stuff that doesn't cost as much money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also would encourage people that are on the lower side of that equation to not be afraid when you get to the point that you're talking about those things. I think you should be talking again about your values. And if your values, if it's a values based conversation, then it is, maybe my value is that I really don't want to owe a lot on my house at the end of time. And so I'm making 2 mortgage notes every month, because I did pick a career where I'm not going to end up with a big, pension at the end or whatever that may be. And you don't need to be ashamed of that. That just shows that you're really thinking about the future, and that you're saying, if I didn't do that, yeah, I could probably do some of these other things, but I'm choosing not to, because that's my value system. I don't want that hanging over my head. And I would actually like to retire at 65 and not at 75.
Yeah.
So that's another reason I don't actually want to spend a lot of money on some of these other things. Those are great conversations. And I
Yes.
think that's good stuff.
Yes, and I think that is the more important thing to look at, is not how much money does this person have, but do their values match mine? Maybe my value is that I'm a partier and I want to go on vacation all the time. And if you're a fuddy-duddy who wants to stay home and pay 2 mortgage payments, then we're not going to be a match for each other. So,
Yep. And that's you don't have to be afraid of. You said, just if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. There does not have to be a bad person in the equation.
right. It's not that one of those ways is right and one of them is wrong. It's just that you're different. And so maybe not a good match as partners. But I think there are so many ways of creating emotional intimacy that are not tied to spending.
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, in the beginning, it's probably more fun and better to try to do some things that there are so many little things you can do to surprise somebody, um, to show up in some way for them that are they don't have a big price tag, but to me, it means a lot more. It means they're thinking about you, that they're, um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That they're putting thought into something. They're not just dropping a bunch of cash on something. So, yeah, I totally agree. And I think looking for those things that really indicate compatibility, like we said, the value system, that those are much more helpful places to put your attention and put your energy.
Yep. I couldn't agree with you more. And so,
Let's take a look at some key takeaways from this episode. What is it that we want people to remember from what we've talked about today?
well, they need to pay attention to the way that, the subtle signs of financial compatibility, or not, in your beginning dating.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's important to remember there's no need to match the other person's lifestyle, but you got to communicate clearly about it.
Yeah. And there are just think about other ways to show up in a dating relationship that are not financially overwhelming.
Absolutely. And like so many other things that we've talked about on this podcast, it's really about asking yourself if you can accept this person where they are today, or if that's too uncomfortable for you, whether their income is higher than yours or lower than yours, can you accept them just as they are? Don't go into it expecting them or their situation to change.
And I'm just going to say that again. Don't go into it expecting their situation to change.
Yes.
I
Like,
swear to God, we can't say it enough.
we can't say it enough, y'all. Don't go into it expecting them to change. Like, well, they don't have a job now, but they're going to get one and then they'll be financially able to do something. It's like, nope. Mm-mm.
Mm.
Accept them where they are or not.
Mm-mm.
Okay, as always, we want you to keep sending us your stories and your questions and your comments. Please follow us on Instagram. For now, we are at Get Dateable on Instagram, and our email address is info@getdateable.com. So feel free to email us that way. And please keep listening and keep sharing our pod with your friends. Our listenership is growing, and our goal is to have listeners in every state, and we're actually getting pretty close to that. So please send this
Yes.
to your friends.
Yes. And what about our next episode? Should we just give them the title to our next episode?
Oh, girl, our title of our next episode is She Was Perfect, But I Was Bored. Why Chemistry Matters.
I love that title so much.
I do too. We crack ourselves up with our own titles. Okay, thanks again for listening to the Dateable AF podcast, where we help you find your happy ending.
And remember, be bold, be kind, and for the love of queer dating, don't text your ex. Stay dateable.
AF.